A highly anticipated matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions is finally here. We'll preview it on today's edition of Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions your first listen each and every day. And thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Crossover Thursdays presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I'm Louie DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. He's Matt Dery, host of Locked On Lions. And Matt, finally a matchup between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions in the time that they are the juggernauts of the NFC. This hasn't happened since week 1 of 2022. And yes, the Eagles made the Super Bowl that season, but at that time, the Lions were still rebuilding, and Philadelphia was coming off a wild card blowout loss in Tampa Bay, and nobody really knew who they were going to become. So this is a game that I think is highly anticipated.
It is, Louie, and you and I were supposed to be doing our crossover a year ago, or at least last year in January, talking about the NFC Championship game at Ford Field. Obviously, the Commanders spoiled the party with a terrific performance in Detroit, and the Lions did not get to that championship game. But you referenced 2022. The Lions actually that day didn't play as poorly as the score indicated. Remember, the Eagles got off to a big lead. The Lions made a comeback and made it interesting. But now, like you said, both teams playing pretty good football. Man, the Eagles that defense is ferocious when they're winners of 3 in a row, and Lions feeling good after taking care of Washington last week.
Yeah, huge win for the Eagles on Monday Night Football against the Green Bay Packers, which of course helps out the Detroit Lions as well in the battle for the NFC North. The Eagles, the #1 seed in the NFC right now at 7-2. Detroit not that far behind, Matt, at 6-3. And again, they're still battling with Green Bay to win that division, whereas Philadelphia, it almost feels like already has the NFC East wrapped up. But this is a big game for Detroit too for seeding. Like that #1 seed in this conference, that feels just so stacked, right? Between Green Bay, Detroit, Philadelphia, LA, Tampa Bay, like getting home field advantage, I think in this conference is so important. So this is a big one for seeding on top of course, the division for Detroit.
No, it is. And you mentioned before the Lions fighting with the Packers in the division. Let's not forget about Ben Johnson, Benedict. As I
That's true. There's 6 wins already. Good point. Yeah.
And the Bears, who are right there.
Tough division.
So Detroit's got the tiebreaker right now due to the head-to-head win in week 2, but Lions, like we said, feeling good. Like you said, a lot of teams jumbled in there. Is this the opportunity for Detroit to go on the road? And look, they've won big road games in prime time already this year, including Baltimore. But is this the opportunity to go in and really stake your claim to the conference? A win in Philadelphia against, like we talked about, that defense would be something else. And certainly I know the Eagles offense, including A.J. Brown, are ready to wake up a little bit. But the Lions defense has played pretty well lately, and Aiden Hutchinson's had another monster year. So I'm excited for it.
We'll talk matchups later on in the show, keys to victory as well. Jam-packed edition of Crossover Thursday for you. Locked on Eagles, Locked on Lions. Matt, do you feel like this one, it sounds cliche, but it kind of means more to Detroit because obviously losing that game to the Commanders, they didn't even get to the NFC Championship, but the Lions probably feel like they let a Super Bowl run slip away because if they win that game, they don't have to go to Philadelphia. Like the Eagles would have had to go to Detroit, and maybe that changes everything. Like Amon-Ra St. Brown has made comments about it before. I feel like this game, they're going to have some extra motivation to show like this could have been our thing last year, and we're ready to take advantage of it this year.
I think there's some of that there, but I also think there's a lot of new faces in Detroit. Whether it's Tate Ratledge, the right guard, whether it's Coyote Awashika having to start at left guard. There's some guys on this roster, mostly back from last year, but I think their mindset is now on 2025 and what they hope is a run in early 2026. But, if you look at the storylines for Detroit, everybody's talking about it here. Dan Campbell taking over play calling duties from offensive coordinator John Morton. Will that happen again? We'll see. I think it will. What does that mean? How creative will Dan be? Will he try to pull out some old Ben Johnson trick bags in this game? Everything's on the table, but fans are happy because they were getting on John Morton when they lost 2 of the last 3. And so for Campbell to kind of just go, hey, look, let's get serious now. I'm going to call these plays, and still says Morton has a big hand in things, etc. But it's the head coach kind of taking the reins, knowing what's ahead of them.
And it's interesting because I think the Eagles were watching that closely because they're kind of dealing with some similar out-of-sync issues with this offense, and there's very little excuses for it considering how talented they are, how much money and top draft picks Howie Roseman has invested in this unit. Like the fact that A.J. Brown yet again has all this drama surrounding him this week about comments he made on a Twitch stream and then had to pretty much reveal all to the media tonight to talk about how he's not satisfied with the passing attack and the overall offensive execution. Time will tell if the Eagles take a page out of the Lions playbook. I don't know if Nick Sirianni would ever take back play calling duties. He hasn't done that since the first half of 2021, but something's got to change, Matt, because again, an offense that has this much talent at every single position should not, even though Green Bay did a great job of Monday Night Football, the weather was cold, that defense is really good, to only score 10 points and to be this Jekyll and Hyde all year, it's got to change. So me personally, like I watched Dan Campbell take that offense over and kind of get them back on track, and I did wonder if the Eagles would ever think about doing something like that.
Is this A.J. Brown thing, though, Lou, is it a story, or is it like, gosh, we've heard this so many times from him, it's such a tired old bit, like, let's just play? I mean, how much play is this going to get in Philly?
I think it's a real story in the sense that Brown is not happy with his role. I think there's a clear disagreement about what the offense is supposed to look like. I think some parts of that organization still believe that some people believe they should lean into what worked last year as a run-first conservative offense that focuses on not turning the football over because that worked, and they're 7-2 right now. But A.J. Brown talked about it tonight that he feels like this team needs to be more aggressive, that they have to adapt because the NFL has changed and they can't just expect to run it back and do what they did last year. So I don't think Brown is ever going to get what he truly wants, which is them to go back to who they were in 2022, 2023 as a pass-first, aggressive, high-volume attack that features him. But there's got to be some sort of middle ground they come to because he is right. But the Eagles can't deal with this every time the ball doesn't go his way. So if that is the case moving forward, they're not trading him right now, but in the offseason, if this continues, I do think there's something to watch.
It's crazy. I know this comes up a lot, but there's just so much talent and so many weapons on that Eagles offense. And like you said, cold weather. Yes, Packer defense is good. But the struggles were there. Hurts sometimes throwing off his back foot. Offensive line, I know we'll talk about. A little bit banged up right now. And I think the Lions feel like maybe because their offense started to click again against Washington. And again, that Commanders defense, oh my gosh. I mean, what an embarrassment. And I know it's a mash unit, but they're bad. And then they got guys getting kicked out of the game. Lions took advantage. It will not be the same. It will not be as easy this week to run between the tackles like it was last week.
Yeah, a lot of matchups to watch because you mentioned how talented the Eagles offense is. The Lions have a lot of talent on that side of the ball as well. So let's dive into it. Coming up next, crossover Thursday, right here, Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions podcast, we are brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The Part Finder tool and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, low prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people and real service. Crossover Thursday is also brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL, the NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you're going to win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup, and you can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use our code LOCKEDONNFL. You're going to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Crossover Thursday, Locked On Eagles, Locked On Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. Thanks for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network. Matt, what a game coming up here. The 7-2 Birds against the 6-3 Lions. And when you look at both sides of the ball, I mean, these are two of the most talented teams on paper, especially on offense. It'll be interesting to see what the game plan is for both, but I think points will not be scarce in this game.
No, but I also think these two defenses are really, really good. We saw what Philadelphia and you guys could do Monday night against the Packers. And I know people in Green Bay and beautiful Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin are livid with what Matt LaFleur is calling right now for Jordan Love. With that being said, the Lions defense is much improved. Linebacking core led by Jack Campbell is really much better. Aiden Hutchinson's been really good again. The secondary, despite all the injuries, is held up pretty good. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it was low scoring again for these two teams. You're right. It could go either way. I think one matchup to definitely watch, and I was talking about it on Wednesday's show with Ross Tucker, is Amon-Ra St. Brown against either, if he's lined up outside, Quinyon Mitchell, or if he's in the slot, Cooper DeJean, because those are two studs that you have there in your secondary that can really cover. And St. Brown is he's a security blanket. He's the guy that when Jared Goff needs it, especially on the road in a tough environment, can get a 3rd and 6, can get you 8 yards. He can find him in the end zone. He's Mr. Reliable. He's one of the best receivers in the league. And to watch the Eagles have at their best with, and Ross said, Mitchell, he thinks is a top 5 corner in the league. If he gets matched up with 14 in the white uniforms, that's definitely something to watch. What are you looking at?
I'm super curious if Quinyon Mitchell is going to shadow St. Brown, because sometimes this year when a team, and the Lions have a lot of weapons, that's why I think you're right. I mean, this could, if it was a 10-7 ball game like Eagles Packers, I wouldn't be surprised. I do think this game will open up a little bit more. Quinyon, when they play a team that has like that one true elite weapon, has tended to shadow that player. But you do have Jameson Williams as well in Detroit. There's Sam Laporta. There's a lot of weapons, so I do think they'll play more zone. I'm curious what they'll do there, though, with Cooper DeJean playing still predominantly in the slot. For me, it's still about that focus of St. Brown, Williams, Jahmyr Gibbs, Laporta. The Lions have so many weapons, specifically like run after the catch weapons that can make plays in space over the middle of the field. You mentioned Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, but I think those linebackers are going to be crucial in this game. Getting these players down on the ground, finishing tackles is going to be so important. Nakobe Dean specifically, since he's come back from injury, the last 3 games has been one of the best players on this defense. Supplanted Jahad Campbell, their first-round rookie, who was the Defensive Rookie of the Year favorite. Dean pretty much stole his job from him. Was the #1 graded Eagle on Pro Football Focus against the Packers. Been a great player as a blitzer, again, open field tackler against the run. Nakobe against those Lions, run after the catch weapons, and Zach Bond as well. Jahad Campbell will rotate in there. Those linebackers, I think, are extremely important.
I think something else to watch, Louie, is the Lions' interior offensive line really struggled against the Vikings 2 weeks ago, and it was a mess in terms of games that Brian Flores was playing and all twists and stunts and blitzes. And there was talk last week that maybe Graham Glasgow would be moved out of the center spot and Tristan Colon would get some snaps. And that ended up happening, but only by injury. Glasgow's fine. Awashika, of course, former Eagle, is going to start at left guard for the injured Mahogany. But that interior of the offensive line, you got a rookie in Tate Ratledge playing in what is his biggest road game of his career. Glasgow and Awashika against your 3D tackles there that have all played well. That's a huge matchup to watch. If those guys did a great job this past Sunday. Again, it was a banged-up Commanders defense. Then Payne gets ejected for punching St. Brown, so they were down to Ross Jackson and David Locke at D tackle. That's an inside joke. But it basically now's when you're really going to earn your money going up against the likes of Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter and those guys. That's something to watch.
Yeah. And Moro Ojomo was unbelievable against Green Bay. He actually called out the game-winning stop on Josh Jacobs, calling out inside zone this way. And those defensive tackles really dictated terms. So that's a big one. I specifically pointed out here Jalen Phillips, the new Eagle they traded before the deadline for from the Miami Dolphins, who had 8 pressures. The game-winning stop on 4th down against Josh Jacobs was unbelievable in his debut for the Birds. Going up against Penei Sewell in that Lions defensive line, you mentioned the defensive tackles against the interior. That's important, but just overall, if the Eagles can win with 4, which they haven't really been able to all year before the Packers game, if they don't have to rely on blitzing as much as they did those first 8 games, that's going to be so massive against a team that, like I said, has so many weapons in Detroit for Jared Goff to utilize. Then they can have 7 guys in coverage. Quinyon Mitchell might not have to shadow and just go wherever St. Brown goes. And I think that just gives them more flexibility. And now that they have Phillips, Nolan Smith came back as well in the lineup last week. He had a sack. Jalix Hunt's been heating up lately. They have like 7 or 8 reliable guys that can get to the quarterback now without blitzing. That's going to be really important. So it's interesting that we're highlighting a lot of Lions offense against the Eagles defense kind of matchups, but I really do think like that's going to be the battle that maybe dictates this game.
Well, and that's the thing. And it seems like every week on all these crossovers, I say it. If you don't protect Jared Goff, and Jared Goff's tremendous. Okay. He's very good, almost great the way he's played for the 5 years he's been in Detroit. But you look at the losses and you look at the games where he struggled, whether it was opening week against Green Bay, where there was a lot of communication issues on that offensive line, and Micah Parsons was in his shirt. The Minnesota game, same thing. And even Kansas City, to an extent, got to Goff. You get to him, he's just not going to scramble around like Jalen Hurts. He's not going to run for 17 yards. But if protected and given time, play action pass game, everything else, he dissects people. I mean, the completion percentage is through the roof again, but it's that interior pressure that would worry me if I'm a Lions fan.
Pocket passers hate interior pressure, Matt. So I think that's a really good thing to point out. For the Eagles offense, I don't know if this is more just for the long term, but I'm watching A.J. Brown against the Lions secondary. I think for the short term and the long term, new play caller Kevin Patullo, the Eagles' new offensive coordinator, has to find a way. And Brown said this today in the locker room that, he's fine opening things up for Devontae Smith, for Dallas Goedert, for Saquon Barkley. But he even said there's times they're not doing a good enough job scheming him open, that he's kind of only being used exclusively as a decoy, and that if a team like Detroit, he said, plays a lot of man, will probably cloud coverage him like every other defense has. They can't just accept that and move on. Well, like, A.J. Brown's out of the game, let's go to everybody else. Like, no, Patullo has to do a better job of saying, let's move him pre-snap, motion, let's get him in the slot, screen plays, get him over the middle of the field. They need to find different, more creative ways to use Brown. And now that he's called that out specifically, and you know how unhappy he is, like, I don't know if they need to get Brown the ball to beat the Lions, but I think they need to do it for the future, especially after what happened today.
Saquon was putting up MVP numbers last year. Do you think?
Right.
Oh, have we seen a regression this year? What's been the story?
The problem is the offensive line has been so banged up. And on the practice report on Wednesday, 4 of the 5 starters were on the injury report. The only one that wasn't is Jordan Mailata. I don't think any of them are going to miss this game. Lane Johnson missed a lot of that Packers game with a knee injury, but came back at the end when they were trying to close the game out. So I think he'll be back. That's been the problem. I mean, yeah, like teams are really honing in on Saquon Barkley, but I think the offensive line has just been not at 100%, dealing with injuries even from the Super Bowl run. So it's been better over the last couple games, especially the Giants game was a bounce back for the rushing attack. But I do think this team is going to need to throw the football to beat the Lions. I just think they have to get teams to back up. They have to get people to respect this passing attack more. And they've been far too inconsistent considering the personnel.
Yeah, it's a talented group, and this is going to be a lot of fun Sunday night, that's for sure.
Keys to victory coming up next, crossover Thursday, Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions. This episode of the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions podcast is brought to you by Betterhelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier. It's already here, especially when life is already packed with work, family, and everything else this season. It's so important to reach out and to check in with friends, family, or even yourself. Just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone that you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits, reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. BetterHelp makes that first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. I've noticed that simply just talking things through, even for a few minutes, really helps clear your head and get back on track. Therapy isn't just for when things are falling apart. It's about staying balanced and growing through the tough seasons. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist who fits your needs, and you can switch anytime if it's not the right match. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? All right, wrapping up Crossover Thursday right here on the Locked On Eagles and Locked On Lions podcast. Matt, keys to victory. This is a huge game. Again, like you said earlier on, probably should have been the 2025 NFC Championship game. Maybe it is a preview of this year's NFC title. If the Lions are going to prove to the world that we could have took this team down to Detroit last year, what are the keys to getting it done on Sunday Night Football in a tough environment at the Link?
All right, I'm going to start off with something a little bit weird and strange, but I'm going to throw it out there. The Lions have had a problem this year with first possession on defense touchdowns. They've given up a ton. And if Philly somehow gets some momentum with that crowd, let's say the Lions win the toss, they defer, they kick off, and Philly goes right down the field and scores. Or Lions get the ball first, they have to punt. I want to watch the first possession on defense. And look, the defense has been really good, and Kelvin Shepard's done a nice job, and there's guys stepping up, like I said, and there's been some depth in the secondary, and eventually they're going to get DJ Reed back and Marcus Davenport, not this week, but eventually. But I think if the Lions allow a right away first quarter touchdown to Philly, that just gets that crowd going, and it gives the Eagles offense some confidence. And of course, they have not had, and now you get AJ Brown popping off. So it's small. I know it's even if the Lions do give that up, they might still win the game. All right. You got to play 4 quarters, but it's something to watch is that first possession.
Yeah.
If the Lions can get a stop, even if they hold them to 3, it's been strange how the Lions have done this, even in wins where the first possession for the other team, they come right down and score. So keep an eye on that.
I don't think that's a weird key because the Eagles have been, it's strange that their offense has been so inconsistent this year, but unlike years past, they've been a really good first quarter offense. Their first drive, that initial 15-play game script, they've really had a lot of success with that. And I think the Eagles, why that's an important key to victory for Detroit is the Eagles are such a better team on offense when they're playing with a lead, right? Because then they can run the ball, control time of possession. If this team has to play from behind and throw it 30 to 40 times a game, they're not going to win many games that way. They should be able to do that, and A.J. Brown wants it to be that way, but they're better off. They're better built as a team that, and it sounds obvious, but with the Eagles specifically, they are built to play from ahead. So I think that's a really important one. If the Eagles are going to get a lead early, Matt, like my first key to victory would be get back to playing under center. Like let's get back to what they were doing against Minnesota and New York. Under center, play action. I thought the run game looked a lot better from under center. The offensive line with those outside zone plays just it looked a lot smoother and a lot like what you saw in 2024. They kind of got back to the same status quo, vanilla, shotgun conservative play against Green Bay. And I don't know why Petula went away from what was working the first 2 games before the bye, but that to me is something I'm watching.
3 of the last 4 road games that the Lions have played, they've won Baltimore, Cincy, lost in Kansas City, and beat Washington. And in those wins, they've held time of possession pretty well, which means Jahmyr Gibbs, 6-7 yards. Here comes David Montgomery for a 4 or 5 yard run. Move the chains. It sets up the play action passing game. And for this week, it's a definite key is time of possession and ball control because you want to keep Jalen Hurts, Saquon, all those guys off the field. So I think another key for the Lions, and look, if Jahmyr Gibbs pops an 85-yard run, it's still 6 points. All right, you'll take it. But I do think the Lions getting back to a little ground and pound, which is what they did this past Sunday under Dan Campbell running the show, at least with the play calling. Do it again. Get that ground game going and keep that Eagles offense off the field. Normally
people say win the turnover battle to get a win, but these two teams, like what you said with Jahmyr Gibbs, it could be an 80-yard touchdown at the drop of a hat. Jamison Williams is one of the fastest wide receivers in the NFL. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the better run after the catch, dynamic inside, slot weapons, and he can play on the outside too. I don't want to put him in a box there, but it's one of the most explosive offenses in football. Philadelphia is one of the more explosive offenses as well over the last couple of years. Win the explosive play battle, and I think you win this game. That is why I mentioned earlier into Kobe Dean and those linebackers, it's so important to tackle in the open field. And it's easier said than done against the speed of that Detroit attack. But I think they need to be aggressive on offense, get explosive plays, and don't let the Lions burn you on some of those, 30, 40, 50-yard plays, or that's going to kill you.
Yeah, I think, too, on the other side, when Hurts is scrambling, if things are covered up down the field and Jalen Hurts is in some trouble and he can make a play, watch Derek Barnes and Brian Branch. Those are the two guys that have got to run Hurts down and make a 3 or 4 yard gain, just that, as opposed to a 13 or 14 yard gain. And those are two key guys against Hurts. And I'm not necessarily spying maybe Anzalone a little bit, the why I'm missing product, but those guys have got to run Jalen Hurts down because he's so dangerous running that football.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Sunday Night Football, Eagles, Lions. This could be a preview of the NFC Championship. We'll see what happens. It's very important in general for that top seed in the NFC. This conference is stacked from top to bottom, and these are two of the best. Matt Dery from Locked On Lions. I'm Lou DiBiase from Locked On Eagles. Thanks as always for making us your first listen each and every day, and thanks as always for making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network.